All right, so here we are at the ROI Group, the second part of the ROI Group, and we're very fortunate today to have a really good friend to me, somebody who is an urban planner and who is he's not just really competent as an urban planner, he really cares. And I'm going to show a couple of slides, so just give me 1 second while I boot up that slide deck. And we're gonna spend about half an hour or so with Paul. So bear with me while I look for the right slide deck. See if I got it. Can you see my slides okay, Paul?
Yes, now.
All right. So as I mentioned just before we started recording, the first part of the meeting was with Canadian Financial founder Patrick Labreche, who has built a fantastic fintech platform, which is going to change financing options for Canadians. And now we're with Paul, a planner extraordinary, and I said somebody who's not only a friend, but who really cares about what he does. This morning, I put on my social media account. Some of you follow me on social media. Last night, I was talking to a client of mine in North Carolina, and he told me it's a commercial property. He needs to rezone it to allow him to do a few other things on the property. He said, yeah, it's going to take about 8 weeks. I said, 8 weeks? He said, yeah, and it's $450, to apply. And he said, what's it like in Ottawa, where you live, Bruce? And I said, well, Paul and I are working on getting a small bunkie approved for one of my daughters. It's only 542 square feet. And so far, the city of Ottawa is preparing to charge us in fees and studies $121,000, and it will take somewhere between 1 and 3 years to get approved, if in fact, after spending all that money, it gets approved. And when I told my wife, Dawn McMillan, this morning at coffee about this, she said, I quote, "That's why Americans are eating our lunch." And I burst out laughing because Dawn doesn't usually sort of talk in that language. So I tweeted that out. I put it on Facebook and other social media, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of feedback from that. But can you imagine $450 in 8 weeks, or $121,000 in 1 or 2 or 3 years? You could see that it's really handicapping Canadians and Canadian real estate entrepreneurs. Now, I wanted to show you this. I don't know, Paul, if you've ever listened. I'm not a political guy. This is not a political ad for somebody. But did you ever hear Pierre Poilievre speak? I got this from you, Dave. Did you ever hear Pierre Poilievre speak about what is happening in Canada? Have you ever heard this, Paul?
I have, yes. I think you posted it a little while ago. I watched it.
I did. So before we turn to you, I'm only going to, it goes on for 18 minutes. I'm going to play for everybody about 3 minutes of this. Is that all right, Paul?
Yeah.
Because, again, I'm not political. I don't belong to any political party. I'm not pushing any political agenda here, please. But it is such a strong example of what we are doing in Canada that is really handicapping and retarding our progress as a nation. And let me play this for you. And Paul, just when I play it, just give me the thumbs up if you can actually hear it.
President Debate, the Honourable Member for Carleton.
Can I just begin? Just start speaking? Not to fill out a form or get permission from an agency or a department or some other authority? Aren't we in Canada here? Don't you need to fill out a form or get permission before you make anything, even if it's just making a speech? Well, you need permission for everything else, and you have to wait an awful long time to get it. According to newly released World Bank data, Canada ranks 36 out of 37 nations for the time it takes to get a building permit. You can't just go out and build something, create jobs, and support your local economy. You have to wait for the gatekeepers in order to get permission. Now, you don't have to ask the World Bank that. You can just drive 25 minutes from here and ask Tim Priddle, runs a lumber mill near Manotick. Now, that lumber mill opened a big warehouse about 40 years ago. And guess how long it took to get approved? 1 week, one form, one stamped document from an engineer, one and done, and away you go. And you know what? That big, beautiful building is still standing safely to this day. But he wanted to build another warehouse, similar dimensions, doing similar things. This time, it took 6 years and $600,000 worth of consultants' fees, charges, and other obstructions. In fact, he had to hire an arborist to write a report on each little poplar tree that he cleared in what was actually just useless ditch brush that had never been used for anything before otherwise and had not been planned to be used for anything else. And yet 6 years, $600,000, 1,500 pages of paperwork it took for him to do that. Money he could have spent creating real jobs. But he experienced what so many experience in this country: life behind the gatekeepers. These are the people who are.
So you see where I'm going.
I think
You see where I'm going with this, right, Paul? I mean, it's an introduction for you. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. But what Mr. Polyev was saying is not untrue. My youngest daughter broke up with her boyfriend, needed a place to live, so I decided to build a 1-bedroom bunkie next to a property I own. And we did a beautiful design. We did the building permit. We did everything with the survey, the topo, all, you know, the well, the septic. We have everything done. And when we submitted it to the city, Paul and I, they came back and said, "Oh, you need a site plan application. $121,000 in studies and fees in 2 years." And I don't want to tell you what I thought of that because it's not very polite. So anyway, without further ado, Paul, tell us more about yourself.
Thank you very much. I could see while we were talking that Karina Guzman was smirking because I think she's probably got firsthand experience with some of the things that were in that video call. So tell about myself. I've been working in the Ottawa area for about 25 years. Before that, in the Toronto area, graduate of the University of Waterloo School of Planning. Work from home. As a self-employed sole practitioner. In terms of I guess what made me want to become a planner, when I was about 17, I was visiting my grandmother, and she was a widow at the time, and she had a family property that was a sort of an old mill, and she told me that she wanted to, the town where she lived, which is in England, had always approached her about wanting to, there were people interested in purchasing it, and it would be a great place for seniors housing. Soon after that, she passed away, and the land fell, or was sort of in my mother and my uncle's names, and the grandchildren. And my uncle reached out to me. I had an interest in travel, geography, how cities develop and grow. And this is in the early 80s, and he put together a team of architects, and he had a sort of town and country planner, they called them. And it went through the process at the local council, and I went, I think I was 18 at the time, when it all was ready to be all signed and sealed, delivered. And I went to the town council meeting, and it was approved, and I learned how architects work, how engineers work, how planners work. Sort of got the bug for it, and applied for and got into the School of Urban Planning at the University of Waterloo, and had some work experiences in the private sector and in the public sector. All my post-university experience has been in the private sector. So that's where I come to the table. So the next question, I think, was about highest and best use.
No, I thought we'd just skip to the next one after
Okay.
that. You know, we have about 15 minutes left, and I want
Okay.
to hear about what's your biggest success so far in terms of your planning career, and the second part of that is what's your biggest failure?
Oh, do we have to talk about that one?
We do.
I would say the biggest success on maybe I'll give an Ottawa example and a non-Ottawa example. The biggest success outside of Ottawa, it's in the Toronto area, a large church built all in wood construction, built using old methodologies, and it was a Ukrainian Orthodox church. It had to face east, it was built. It took a lot of issues and engineering and approvals, and because they were going to be using a nearby pond for firefighting, it was built, and it won all sorts of design awards in Brampton at the time. A big central focus for the Ukrainian community in that part of the GTA. I assume it's even more prominent now with what's going on in the Ukraine. On a sort of local basis, two projects come to mind. One is on Sussex Drive by King Edward, the Aga Khan Foundation headquarters, which I was part of a planning team, securing approvals from the city and the National Capital Commission. It was quite complicated because the main design architect was based in Japan, and myself and the other planner and the sort of day-to-day architects were based in Toronto and Ottawa. We had all the time zone issues and sharing files. It all worked out. It got built. It's been a big success in Ottawa. As well, another project on Rideau, where an expansion of a seniors home was built right into the back of the Ottawa Public Library on Rideau Street. And that was quite complicated. It got built. It was an expansion of an existing building. So there's always challenges when you're adding on to an existing building in terms of merging the existing building and the new building and making sure everything fits. Sometimes on the old buildings, as Bruce is probably aware, you maybe do not have the most detailed existing drawings, and there's quite a skill in ensuring that everything all fits together. In terms of something that wasn't a success, it was a fairly small project here in Ottawa, whereby there were some steps that I thought needed to be taken. I sort of overthought it, and there were some steps that, from a legal perspective, that were not required. Cost the client some money. I had to do quite a bit of backpedaling, and I had to agree to do upcoming consulting work on the file for no charge because of my, I guess, my slip up initially. It all worked out in the end, but that was something that I wasn't too proud of. It all worked out, but there were some tense moments. So
Paul, I'll ask the questions. It's a Q&A. And
sure.
People, if you have questions for Paul, this is the time to ask them. Put them in the chat box and I'll ask them. So if I was a novice and a real estate investor and I wanted to build a 3 or 4 story apartment building, I think they call them stubbies today, in a place like Ottawa, is that process just so overwhelming that like a new real estate investor just shouldn't even attempt it, Paul?
Well, there's a cutoff in Ottawa. In Ottawa, there's a cutoff. 4 units or more triggers what's called site plan approval, which is a lot more complicated than a building permit project. So you can build 1 unit, 2 units, or 3 units just as a building permit, not site plan approval. As well, generally, I believe it's 4 stories or more triggers an elevator, 7 units or more triggers handicap accessible units. So those all add to the complication, and generally just a site plan application, a building permit only application for up to 3 units can be done in that's in the matter of from the time of submission to the time of building permit, a few months. Once you're into site plan approval, your costs go way up. Anything above about 13 units. The site plan application fee at the City of Ottawa, I think, is about $48,000 or $50,000. You're paying securities, you're paying development charges, parkland levies. It gets very expensive, but there is a 13 or 14 unit building and a 140 unit building will not have 10 times the city costs, because many of your background studies can apply to a 13 or 14 unit building or a 130 or 140 unit building, but you will be paying development charges and parkland fees based on the amount that you are developing. Some people have suggest that instead of doing, say, a 10 unit building that would trigger all sorts of the studies and the site plan processes, instead divide the property into 2 or 3 lots and build a 3 unit building on each.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Paul. What, if anything, in your opinion, can be done to reduce the cost of approvals and speed them up? Maybe the answer is nothing, that we're just stuck with what is a system that really, in my opinion, is broken.
Well, there has been some a task force at the province has come forward with some recommendations. They were talked about in early January. Their report was issued a week or 2 ago. The city of Ottawa is reacting to them. I think they're having a report going to planning committee tomorrow about this. There are some thoughts that more as of right planning permissions should be granted, whereby the minimum threat, like when I said 4 units and more triggers site plan approval, there's talk that that threshold number will go up. As well, thresholds that on certain corridors of streets and as of right, minimum number of stories can be permitted without a zoning change. That frees up a lot of time. But as we know, and some of the people on this call who are involved in this field, trying to initiate change of what we consider to be a very slight change in a neighborhood elicits a lot of reactions from nearby neighbors. Planning committee agendas and committee of adjustment agendas are often very full of nearby neighbors complaining. These regulations that they're talking about are, some people think that they could have changes into the Provincial Planning Act. A lot of it will depend on if they could be done in time for June when there's an election. I don't know if that can occur, and things tend to move fairly slowly. As well, one of the things that I find quite frustrating, it's become more frustrating in the COVID era, is that mandated timelines don't seem to mean much, whereby you submit an application and there's a sort of statutory time frame at which they say, in 30 days, you'll get that's when the comment period ends. And then you expect just a couple of days for them to collate them all and send them back to you. I just before we got on this call, I got an email from a city planner who said to me a week ago that I would have comments by today. She just sent the email saying it's going to be another 2 weeks.
Wow.
And all this time, it just grinds up time and money. Now, there are files that I'm involved in where the delay has been at our end. We get sometimes quite a complicated set of responses, and we've got to balance them all out and figure out what needs to be done. And then sometimes the clients go away and think about it, and time gets chewed up that way. But the mandated timelines don't seem to mean much. I believe in some of these proposed regulations that the provincial task force was talking about, there was a recommendation that some as of right, or some things can just proceed. If they don't meet the timeline, things just keep on going. And I think the city that's one of the things that they're pushing back on. The city's director of planning has got a report to planning committee for tomorrow in Ottawa saying there were about 50 recommendations in this task force, and some the city planning department agree with, some don't apply to Ottawa's situations, and then other ones they fundamentally don't agree with, and they've indicated why. So I think mandated timelines really need to be kept in check. And a lot of the people that I deal with day to day have always worked in a fairly structured work environment at an office, and now they're working from home. I have to book appointments to talk to them for 5 or 10 minutes on Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams calls. It used to be I could phone their extension and they would answer, and now they're not available. And it's been 2 years And they still haven't figured out an easy way for people like myself or you, Bruce, to get hold of these people on fairly short notice.
So Paul, if you were king of planning for a day, if you were the god of planning for a day, what are 3 changes that you would make? You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be that is politically supported. I mean, you've been in this business a long time. You're very knowledgeable. What are 3 changes that you would want to see?
In most urban centers in, say, in Ontario, that's where my work experience has been, primarily in Ottawa and Toronto in the past. I would either extend the exemption for a lot of parking requirements, or I would increase the threshold, the say for residential or commercial space, the amount that you can build without having to require parking. The City of Toronto just a few weeks ago, they totally removed, I think it's citywide. Many cities in the United States have done that, and they're just as suburban as Ottawa is. And some people, you know, there's that sort of expression, if you build it, they will come. If you build an apartment building, and you're only providing half a space, you know, you got a 50-unit building, you've only got 25 spaces. The first 25 people who want to pay extra for a parking space, they get their parking space, or if there's visitor, they get the visitor. But when you sign a lease, you know that you don't have the right to a parking space, and that will then, as the owner, you know who you've targeted your building to certain tenants. Parking is very expensive. I remember years ago, 30, 40,000. I think it's even much more than that, especially when you go underground. It's very expensive. It's just, and I'm finding, you know, I've got 2 kids and they're 21 and 25, and very few of their friends have got their own cars. I have a brother-in-law who's a car salesman, and he tells me he gets very few people in their 20s buying cars. It doesn't seem to be the thing. When I was 16, 17, I couldn't wait to have my driver's license. I know many people in their 20s without driver's licenses. So a car for every apartment units in downtown and midtown or middle part of Ottawa seems to be overkill. I would bump up the threshold, like so that more as of right projects can go forward. And I'd also keep to, I sort of said it before, the mandated timelines, because it just grinds up costs. And for people who are trying to build affordable housing, to have all of these costs that just go on every month, something has to give. And it could be the finishes on the building because the owner used up too much money in mortgage payments because they couldn't get their project built in time. So those are sort of 3 things I would try and change.
What, in your opinion, what do cities and towns look like in 15 years? We've had a pandemic. It looks like this war in Europe is having significant impacts. You know, I mean, environmental situation is becoming more complicated. What do you think cities and towns will look like in 15 years?
I can see in Ontario, the Ottawa, Toronto, Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo, I can see those getting more dense. The City of Ottawa, their official plan is calling for a certain percentage of new housing units within the green belt. There are, if you look on the map, there are areas of the City of Ottawa, and I'm sure there are in the City of Toronto and Hamilton. There are areas within that are in serviced land that are sort of underbuilt, and I can see those being becoming more of a focus of interest. That ties in with the decreased utilization of the sort of single occupant car, and younger people not as interested in having cars, so they will want better transit. As the people in Ottawa who are on this call know, the transit in Ottawa has suffered a lot. There's been cost overruns, all sorts of issues, but public transit I can see becoming more prominent. I will say though, I know a lot of people in the COVID era who now have the opportunity to work from home. They are not crazy about going back on a crowded bus day to day to an office location that could be 45 minutes or an hour away in all weather, when they could, many of them were able to manage it from home. I do see small towns growing that have the infrastructure to allow people to work from home, good internet, and good sort of tertiary industries that they can work together with. I see, one thing I see is a move away from sort of single use buildings, whereby it's, you know, there's, especially in the, not so much in the outer suburban areas, but more in the midtown and downtown areas, a lot of buildings that are mixed use, ground floor retail or office, and upper floor residential. I can see that becoming more and more of a trend. Now, having said that, in the last 2 years, retail has taken an absolute killing. And there's the city, I think there are parts of the city of Ottawa where you have to build retail on the ground floor, and my understanding is that the city is starting to look at that may be a bit onerous.
So Paul, as you know, I'm active in a number of towns on my own account, including the city of Belleville, where the Senator's AHL affiliate is. And I went to the Committee of Adjustment in Belleville twice to get ground floor residential use approved. You know, the demand for commercial space has definitely taken a kicking, for sure. That's an accurate statement, I believe. And so I wanted to have 2 ground floor residential units. And the reason I did that, Paul, was that to create a live-work condition, so that the front of this building, it's a downtown building, could be, say, a registered massage therapist or a hairstylist, or somebody who's operating a physio practice or a nail bar, and he or she could live in behind, right? So we are doing some really creative stuff. And fortunately, the Committee of Adjustment in Belleville agreed both times. The problem that we face in a city like Ottawa is that our planning department is, I really don't know how to describe it. I have a lot of respect for many of the people in the planning department, but the actual implementation of the approval process, and I think Paul has, you know, in the few minutes that he's been able to spend with us, has really outlined how difficult it is to get projects approved here in Ottawa. Just really, it is maybe one of the most difficult jurisdictions in North America. Again, going back to the example we started with, Paul, North Carolina, you know, 8 weeks and $450, and in Ottawa, $121,000 and 1 or 2, maybe even 3 years to get something approved. That's not good for any city or town. What I would say, my sense of it is that Paul's right, that we're going to see a lot less monocultured buildings. If I owned an office building in downtown, I don't care, downtown anywhere, I would do exactly what Paul said. I would rehabilitate that property to be a live, work, play, socialize, make, shop, learn place. Because the idea of, you know, you've heard me say it before, many of you, the idea of getting up in the morning and driving in your Tesla for an hour and a half downtown, going into an office building, working there 8 or 10 hours, and then reversing the process. I think that is really a terrible way of organizing our lives. Paul, is it okay, would you consider putting your name and email address in the chat box, just if people have questions, they could reach out to you? Paul is extremely, Paul, it will do that for us, and I really am grateful to him. I wish I'd had more time with Paul today. You know, the first part of the presentation was supposed to be about 45 or 50 minutes, and then Paul would have had more time. But there is a good news side of the degree of difficulty. And if a large developer, maybe there are some large developers on the call with us today, but if you were to take a large developer in Ottawa, my hometown and Paul's hometown, and put him or her on the rack, you know, the torture rack where they stretch you and they torture you, they would actually admit, after you torture them for a few minutes, that the zoning rules and these bizarrely difficult and complex and expensive things are their very best friends, because it keeps the real estate entrepreneurs out. right? Like, I mean, you know, to spend $121,000 in planning fees and studies to build a bunkie is ridiculous, right? But to spend you know, $1 million or $3 million or more to get a subdivision, whether it's a commercial or industrial or residential subdivision approved, doesn't matter. But to spend, you know, 10 years in some cases getting a subdivision approved, what that means is that you don't have a lot of competition. What it means is that their profitability, when they finally get through that process, is tremendous. So zoning rules actually protect these large developers. It does. It makes them more profitable, not less. They love more rules, great. But for us as real estate entrepreneurs, and I consider myself a real estate entrepreneur, they are a nightmare. Paul, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I think if you were to look at a map of the outskirts of Ottawa, the outskirts of the GTA, you would see that the vast majority of land that is being held for the next phase of urban development, whether it's, and it could be at densities that just create more sprawl, but most of it is owned in Ottawa by a handful of companies or their subsidiaries, or if you did a deep dive into the legal entities, they're all interconnected. It's very hard, and the small entrepreneurs are probably like the large companies in Ottawa do not generally work on projects under a certain size or a certain unit count. They don't generally go into what's known as the infill areas. Like the big single family home builders are not building in the inner core. They're building on the outskirts, and they've got the team of consultants and the time to get through the process. You did mention about how long it does take in Ottawa. I have a project in Kemptville, which is in the town of North Grenville, so about half an hour south of Ottawa. A fairly simple zoning application. I submitted the application before Christmas. They said to me, it's great. I submitted electronically. They said, we need the paper copies to start the process. I met the town clerk in the parking lot at the town hall the first week of January. It was a freezing cold day. I signed the application with a mask on and showed her my driver's license as ID on the hood of my car. She took it into the building. We had the hearing scheduled about 4 weeks later, and then they had a few minutes of questions. It was all done on Zoom. Then it goes into the statutory appeal period, and I got a letter a few days ago saying it's all approved, and the fee was $1,000.
Wow.
And I was on a Zoom call last Friday, I think it was, on another project, and in Ottawa, the city planner, when I got on the call, the other people were talking, and the owner was kind of joking with the city planner about how long it takes for everything. And I gave them this story, and the immediate reaction was the inference that the city planner in Ottawa said is he thought like that there was something untoward had gone on as to how quick it had gone through. And he said something about the days of money and envelopes changing hands are over. Wow. So he, and everything I did was on the up and up, paid the $1,000. But the thought was, if it could go that quickly, somebody's palms had to have been greased.
Well, that is insulting, and
yeah.
If somebody were to say that to me, I would take that up with his or her boss, and I would take that up with the mayor, because I don't take kindly to those kinds of insinuations.
Yeah. Well, I had to say that everything was done on the up and up, and it's just a quicker process.
I think that person who said it has a problem, not you, Paul. So anyway, I want to thank everybody again. There will be 2 recordings. One of the first part with Patrick Labrèche on the financing, and also, of course, Paul's presentation. One other thing I would ask everybody is I'm kind of running out of ideas on guests for the ROI group. We only do 10 a year. We don't meet in August. We don't meet in December. So if you guys have a suggestion for a guest, even a subject that you would want us to explore, I don't want to repeat myself. We've been doing this now for a while, so please, suggestions are welcome. I got one suggestion already, which is to have a presentation by a Toronto-based group. I know the Tiny Home Group out of Toronto, to talk about some of the things that they've learned, and I think that I'm going to take that up. But if you have any other ideas, please submit them to me, and I look forward to seeing you all next month. Thanks again, Paul.
Bruce,
Yes.
I don't know if you've had this about tiny homes. I mentioned to you a few weeks ago about that group that are building tiny homes in backyards. It was on Dragon's Den. Do you think they would be a good group?
That's an excellent idea. In fact, I'd like to get the Bunky Life guys. There's a lovely couple who run Bunky Life, which is now, I think, a $10 million a year company. That's a possibility, and that's a really good idea.
I think they were from near Guelph or Georgetown.
I have it on my computer somewhere. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Great job.
Bye.